Welcome to the show. It's Ivy Nation Sports Talk. We're up and rolling on a Wednesday week. It's the week debut this week, however I want to say it, of Vince D'Addario.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah, because I wasn't here Monday because I did an evening show. And then yesterday, Jesse's back in the saddle.
Yeah.
And here I am on Wednesday. So I'm fired up. This is the first time I've had a chance to talk about Navy. And everything that
it is
to the table. So
it is, and you can bring a lot about Navy if you want. I was just telling you before the show started that we had someone in the show yesterday. Jesse brought his whiteboard yesterday. We had comments from Marcus Freeman talking about the differences in Navy's offense from last year to this, and there was someone who was in the show who went on the YouTube comments afterwards and told us that Navy is not a triple option heavy team anymore, Vince.
Yeah, that's just it's just not right. It's not correct. So I decided I need
it might not all look like classic wing T triple option, but at its core, it's still a triple option team.
Just because a team doesn't line up in a wing T does not mean they're not running triple option, by the way. Like that's
right. If you were seeing them do multiple things, like there are options to every play, which, sometimes it might be, double option. Sometimes it might be triple, but there are multiple options to virtually every play they have still.
Correct.
Now there's a lot more eye candy. There's a lot more window dressing because of the shotgun and some different motions and things like that they do. But again, like if they motion and they fake a handoff, that's option one, for example, the fake handoff. Then the quarterback has the ball in his hand. He can run with it. He can pass it. Those are two options right there. So again, it might not look like classic triple option, but there are three options on that one play, just as an example, even though they're running it out of a shotgun. So,
yes.
Yeah, I mean, we all know that it doesn't look like that Navy team that we saw last year in the season opener, but they are still at their core a triple option team. It just those options look different because of how they line up.
Correct.
A lot of times. So, what are you shaking your head at? Is it the same thing I'm talking about, or something else?
Thing. And then there was another comment on the same video about that's easy to defend Navy. Kelly did it. Kelly also lost to Navy.
Well, and again, it's a different. It is different looking. You're absolutely right. Kelly lost to Navy multiple times.
3 times, I do believe. 09, 10, and 16. Correct. So he's like, it's easy to whoop them by 30. Kelly did it. I'm like, well, yes, he did, but he also lost to him 3 times.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, the point is this is a completely different looking Navy offense than last year. It's not the team that Notre Dame beat by 39 points last year in Dublin. It is a different looking team, but it is still a team that, like when you look at the athletic matchup, and I went through the defensive rankings, give full credit to Navy, but they've played an FCS team and 5 group of 5 teams so far. It's a different, Notre Dame has the 10th ranked defense in the nation. So let me just start with this one, though, because we've got some questions lined up. Get your questions in. It is the Mailbag show. Salty bombed us with a lot of questions, but
that's a good call.
I'll just go with this from Andre. What do you love more? People doubting Notre Dame's defense, or people believe that Notre Dame is just going to lose to Navy?
I mean, I don't love either one, to be perfectly honest with you.
I think it's a little bit sarcastic.
I know. Look, it is hilarious to me how people still doubt Notre Dame's defense, even though they're still the 5th best scoring defense in the country. Name the metric. Notre Dame is one of the top teams in the country, period. And even with all the injuries that they have suffered, they're still one of the top defenses in the country, and that's not changing no matter who they play. So that part just blows my mind. And then the fact that just because Navy is undefeated, Notre Dame's going to lose to them. Like, look, more than one thing is okay to be true at the same time. Navy's having a great season. They're having a great season. They're undefeated. They're ranked. It's a great season. Notre Dame's still a better football team. Like, it's okay for both of those things to be true at the same time. And, I don't know exactly what's going to happen on Saturday. I believe that Notre Dame should win this game. It's still the number 12 team in the country versus the number 23 team in the country. Notre Dame should win that game. And frankly, they should win that game convincingly. So again, it's okay for two things to be right at the same time. Good for Navy. They could still make the 12-team playoff even if they lose to Notre Dame, because they could potentially win the AAC, right? So, it's not sad, because that would be not appreciating what Navy has done. But the fact that the only two teams left ranked on Notre Dame's schedule are Army and Navy, that's a hat tip to Army and Navy. That's not a knock against Notre Dame's schedule. That's a hat tip. It's like, hey, they're having a great season. Congratulations. Notre Dame should still win those games. So I think people just need to understand that it's okay to be happy for Navy and the fact that they are a good team this year, and also think that Notre Dame's going to win.
Notre Dame doesn't have a chance, Vince. I've just, people have convinced me Notre Dame doesn't have a chance. Why are they even showing up on Saturday? I don't know.
Question.
I have no idea why they're going to New Jersey to play this game, because this Navy offense is so good and like so beyond anything that Al Golden should be able to scheme against. I have no idea why Notre Dame's going to play this game. So that's
what's not good.
What's that?
Navy's defense. Just throwing that out there. Their defense is not great.
See, and that's the thing, again, like going back to how Navy runs, the reason that they are able to do so many things is because of all this different eye candy that they're throwing in with the shotgun. They've got a great athlete playing quarterback. And I guess, there are some people who kind of think of him as, like maybe he's got a future beyond just playing quarterback for Navy. I don't know. But, I know he's not very accurate from some of the things that I've seen downfield. Like if you look at the majority of their passes, though, like it's guys who are wide open because what's the key to playing against the option? Assignments. Right. And so many guys, and again, as we talked about yesterday, it's primarily the slot backs, the guys on the wings who end up with the ball in their hands most of the time, the recipient of these passes. It's because guys blow assignments on them. And that's what this still comes down to is assignment football. That's how you defend any level of option, is keeping your assignments.
They still have the 125th best passing offense in college football. So yes,
their pass efficiency is actually very high, but from a yardage standpoint.
Right. But I mean, yeah, pass efficiency, great, because that means they don't throw it very often. So they throw for 160 yards a game, right? Look, Notre Dame's not a whole lot.
Their yards per completion is up there, again, because they catch people napping.
Because of the triple option.
Right.
Right? I mean, so look, Navy is a good football team, especially compared to what they usually are. And everybody respects that, right? But again, two things can be true. You can be a good football team. You can also not be as good as Notre Dame. So until they prove to me that they can consistently beat up on Notre Dame's defense, I'm going to have a lot of confidence in what Notre Dame's going to be able to do on Saturday. That's where I'm at. Look, Notre Dame also gets a chance to touch the football in these games, and they're going to go up against the 92nd overall team defense in the country in Navy. So I like Notre Dame's chances in this game.
No, I do too. I mean, they've got to score, obviously, but
sure.
I mean, what do we see every regardless? And that's always the side of this matchup that really never gets talked about is the offensive side, Notre Dame's offensive side of the football against Navy's defense, because those guys are undersized too. And there is no equivalent defensively to what's essentially the gimmick of the triple option that can help an undersized, under-athletic, mediocre athletic type team that helps them stay in the game. Defensively, you still have to line up, and your athletes, regardless of size and speed, have to try to match up with the other team's, athletes with their size and speed. And that is something on both sides of the ball, but particularly when you look at Navy's defense against Notre Dame's offense, that's something that this is going to be the biggest challenge they've had. Well, while the option and everything that Navy brings with them offensively is going to be Al Golden's probably biggest challenge this year, because it's so unique and so different from anything that they've seen. But Navy just has not played, they haven't played a Power 4 team this year. Again, all group of 5 in Bucknell. And Bucknell, by the way, as I mentioned yesterday, the 102nd ranked defense in the FCS, not even FBS, in the FCS. So it's going to be a huge difference in what Navy is also facing this weekend in the form of those guys wearing blue and gold or whatever they happen to be wearing for Notre Dame.
And look, they beat a really good Memphis team, right? I think we can all appreciate the fact that Memphis is 6-1 right now. Navy put 56 on Memphis. But you know what else they did? They gave up 44 to Memphis.
Right.
So again, can they if it's a shootout, let's say it's a shootout. We'll just say that, like, Notre Dame's defense doesn't show up. So it's a shootout. Are they going to be able to score more than Notre Dame? That's a legitimate question right now. They may get some points on Notre Dame's defense, but they're not going to get a lot of points on Notre Dame's defense. And regardless of who Notre Dame plays right now, the defense is going to keep them in the game. And that, I feel that way about any offense in the country, which includes Army and Navy. Notre Dame's defense will keep them in every single game that they are in for the rest of the season. I don't see Notre Dame getting blown out because I think Notre Dame's defense is that good, right? It's, can the offense score enough points to, win the game? I think they can. So, I mean, we'll see what happens when the predictions come out and what everybody thinks is actually going to happen and, those types of things. But, one of the benefits, I think, to this game, Sean, and you tell me what you think about this, any chance that Notre Dame is overlooking this game is thrown completely out the window because they're undefeated and ranked, and this is a chance for Notre Dame to make a statement.
There's no way you're overlooking Navy in this game, just like there's no way you're going to overlook Army in the game coming up here in about a month. You're at the beginning of the season, you look at the schedule and you're thinking that, maybe they'll be, around a 500 team or whatever. They're a combined 13-0 right now. That is absolutely the silver lining. They might be better, but there's no way you're overlooking them. They're going to get every bit of your attention in, this week in the lead up to this game.
Exactly.
There's no doubt about that.
And that's actually a gift for Notre Dame, because a lot of times going up against Navy, it's like, oh, here we go. We got to play Navy and their gimmicky offense and blah, blah, blah. They're going to be completely 100% focused on this game because Navy's a good football team. And so, Notre Dame, if they bring their A game, which I don't know why they wouldn't, but they might not. But if they bring their A game, then they should be fine, right? I mean, again, shouldn't be hard to focus on a ranked, undefeated team that you're playing.
Correctamundo. Good start. You brought some heat. I felt like we both brought a little bit of heat with that first question there. I'm not going to answer this right now. Worst 2K big men. He says, how can people still think an 11-1 Notre Dame team will not make the playoffs? Have a lot of thoughts on this. It's coming in rapid fire. So I feel like I have no idea what Vince's answer is going to be. I know what my answer is going to be. So we're going to save that for rapid fire because it's actually, glad you brought that up. Worst 2K big men HD. You'll hear about that in rapid fire. So we're going to get into that conversation. Salty, do you believe as I do there is a fake punt play in which Buckner rolls out and passes the ball?
Buckner's not on the punt team, and I don't think
punt play. Yeah.
So
now,
I
I
do
read
not.
this wrong because I actually was thinking field goal, and I would have said
Right.
absolutely yes after what
Yeah,
we saw.
that I would agree
last week.
with. He's not on the punt team. He's not big enough to be one of those guys that we used to call them the elephants, the guys that are right behind the line of scrimmage, usually 3 guys, and they kind of catch the extra wave of guys in front of the punter. He's not big enough to be one of those guys. And so you're not going to be bringing him in to take a snap on the punt team. So punt team, no. Field goal team, sure. That's probably in their playbook. And the thing is about big time college football is you have different fakes each week depending on the opponent. And so that's why they ran what they ran last week, is because, it was opponent specific. And if they didn't run it, they had to eat it and probably not use it the rest of the year. So, yeah, I think punt, no. Field goal, yes.
Yeah, I would go field goal. I'm not sure what USMA 87
Well,
is.
he's saying that he wasn't normally on the field goal team. They put
Right.
him in basically for the fake.
But they slipped him in
100%.
because he's got the same number as
Correct.
the holder. And I think early in camp,
yeah.
we thought he was the holder, but it
Right.
turned out it was Salerno instead.
And here's the thing. Number one, he can hold, by the way, because that is one of the things he was trying to do, was be the holder. He got beat out for it. But number two, again, like I said, he's not big enough to sneak onto the field as one of those up backs on the punt team. He would look so out of place that it would be very obvious.
Yeah,
that he
you
was on
can't
the
sneak
field.
him out there,
No.
because especially now that it's on film that he's ran a fake,
that
everyone's
too,
going to
yeah.
be looking for number 26,
Right?
for one thing,
Right.
And yeah, so you can't just slip 26 out there on the punt team, or it's going to be very, very obvious.
Right.
So,
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, but I agree. Like I would say, there's a pretty good chance that there's some kind of pass play on that field goal team. Now you might not see it until, like maybe a bowl game or playoff or whatever it happens to be. But on the other hand, as they talked about coming out of, last week, it's like, look, they got a specific look and they felt like it was something that they could take advantage of, extend a position, and they went ahead and ran it, So who knows? Maybe when you see it. Salty also wants to know, is Aamil Wagner's performance this season flying under the radar?
To a degree, I think he's been one of the more consistent of the 5 offensive linemen. And I think he was the biggest question mark coming into the season. And then all of a sudden you had all those season-ending injuries. And so yeah, I think overall he is probably flying under the radar a little bit more than anticipated, because if everybody was healthy from the beginning of the fall camp, right, he would have been the quote-unquote weak link. And we would have been hyper-analyzed and hyper-focused on him and his play and what he's been able to do. And we would have not talked as much about the other guys because they would have been playing better. And now he's like the best one that's out there from week in to week out. Yeah, there's some games where maybe one guy's better or whatever, but he's been the most consistent. And I think people are taking that for granted just a little bit. And I think he is flying under the radar a little.
Yeah, I think so as well, because when do you typically talk about offensive linemen? When they're not playing well. And we haven't had to talk about Aamil Wagner because he's played very consistently all year long.
He's made his share of mistakes.
Yeah,
and I think we all.
But he's still been the most consistent, I think, of the linemen who they've had out there.
Look, let's be honest. He is not only performing for this year and what he needs to do and being the most consistent guy, but he's also, this is a season-long audition for next season, because if everybody's healthy, I'm not saying Aamil Wagner won't start, but I think there'll still be competition, because there's some good tackles on this team that, Gerby Lambert obviously is a young gun who's going to get better. And then you got Charles Jagasaw, and then you got Aamil Wagner. So you're going to have 3 legitimate guys to start at tackle next year. And then, do they move Anthony Knapp inside, or does he stay at tackle? So then do you have 4 tackle? You know what I mean? So this is a nice, long, active audition, I think, for Aamil Wagner, whether he's going to start next year or not, be that cemented guy that okay, we got the right side taken care of. What are we going to do with the left side? Or is every spot going to be open? I think that's a legitimate question right now.
No, it absolutely is. I mean, it's shaping up to be like you're gonna like with all the guys that they've got, because you've got injured guys who are going to be coming back, and all these guys who are playing right now. There's going to be a ton of offensive line battles going on in the spring. I mean, they're literally going to have the most experienced line one way or another.
Yeah.
That they've had, with the exception of Jagasaw and Lambert, who a lot of people obviously consider two of the most talented linemen that they've got, but they just haven't played this year.
Right. I mean, there's a million different combinations and scenarios that I can think of for the offensive line next year. Are you going to slide Anthony Knapp down? Are you going to, there's a lot of options, I think, going into next year. And I think all of them are better than anything that you've had all season. And that includes the first day of fall camp. So, because you're going to have a ton more experience.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for the super chat, Tyler. He says, is it me or is this the perfect year for the first ever 12-team playoff? Could you imagine if we still had a 4-team playoff?
Look, I watch more Notre Dame than anything else, but I obviously am a student of all of college football. And it's been a wild season. I mean, if you just look at the AP rankings and who's undefeated, who's got one loss, and it is wild. It is all over the board. I will also say that it is October 23rd. And for the most part, every year that there was a 14 playoff, it kind of figured itself out for the most part. There might have been one team with a beef or something along those lines, but it always seemed to work itself out for that top 4. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that would definitely happen this year, but this time of year, it is usually chaos. Maybe not as much this year, or maybe not as much in other years as it is this year, but there's a lot of stuff that is still to happen and has happened. But by the end, I would be interested to see, when we get to the last week in November, Sean, will we be able to sit here and convincingly say, you know what, these are the top 4 teams? Usually that's the way it is. But.
No, you're exactly right. And I mean, when you look at the top 25 right now, Alabama only fell to 15, and they are the first 2-loss team.
Yeah.
And they are one of only 2 2-loss teams ranked right now. And Vanderbilt is the other one at number 25, of course, because they beat Vanderbilt. And guess who Vanderbilt hosts this weekend? Texas.
Yeah.
So
right.
Everybody else has either 0 losses or 1 loss. Now, part of that, and the answer to the question is yes, this is the perfect year. Part of that is because of the fact, you've got these bloated conferences,
right,
which you would think that everyone is actually it makes it tougher. And in the SEC, it has, because, Texas still having to play Alabama and or Georgia rather, and all the other teams that are in there. But in these other conferences, what's really kind of funny is a lot of these teams will only either play one other good team during the regular season, or they're going to miss a lot of teams, so it's going to make things even more complicated, I think, by the time things all shake out at the end of the season.
I think there's going to be a lot of discussion for 9 through 12, you know what I mean? Or 9 through 11, depending on, because I've seen a lot of projections where the group of 5 team is actually higher than 12 because of the way they've been playing. Right.
Yeah.
So, the last 4 teams in, let's say that. So the last 4 teams in, I think there's going to be a lot of discussion, at least the way things are shaping out right now. You're going to have some debate between some 1 and 2 loss teams and strength of schedule and all of those different things. I think you're going to have a healthy debate at that point. And I will save my opinion on Notre Dame until rapid fire, but I think you're going to have a healthy debate on a lot of those teams.
I think so too. I absolutely think so as well. Yeah. But I mean, this is because of all this depth in the top 25. It's absolutely the perfect year.
And listen,
I couldn't imagine trying to only pick 4 teams.
Right. As of right now,
especially as well as everyone's playing, it's, oh, great, we got 2 more SEC teams.
Right. Oh, I know. Well, and the funny thing is Vanderbilt almost lost to Ball State last weekend. So
Right.
I mean, the up and down of these teams is just is something else, because Ball State's a not good football team. But the Fighting Shaq Vans took a tie game into the fourth quarter against Vanderbilt. So, any team can be vulnerable any week, which makes it even more fun to watch.
DK wants to know if Army has any advantage of having Notre Dame versus Navy film.
Oh, it's absolutely an advantage, because you always look, when you're coaching, you always look for film of the team that you're playing when they play a similar team to you, right? So whether it's the offensive philosophy, the defensive philosophy, whatever it happens to be, that's the film you want to get, right? And while Navy does, as the one guy on YouTube, pointed out, Navy does things a little bit differently than they have in the past, but the principles of what they do are still the same. And so Army is going to be able to glean a lot off of that Notre Dame film. So what Notre Dame's going to have to do is, not only are they going to have to, have a scheme ready to go for Navy and how they want to do it, but they're going to have to be able to tweak that scheme for Army and show Army some things that they didn't show in the Navy game in order to be successful. Now, they could roll out the very same, plan and all that and probably still win the game. But if Al Golden's the defensive coordinator that I think he is, he's going to keep a couple of wrinkles to himself to employ against Army. And Army's a little bit different than Navy. I mean, they are a little bit different. The thing.
They're a lot different.
Yeah.
Especially this year.
Yeah. So I mean, but the core principles of what they want to do are very similar. And so it is an advantage. But then, again, Al Golden, it's a chess match, right? Al Golden then gets to make his move as well. So they're not going to do the exact same thing against Army that they did against Navy either.
Yeah, and I mean, don't forget, they're in the same conference now. They're both in the American. So there are other games where
right.
each team's kind of, have that same advantage when they're going through and they're watching game film. I tend to think it's a bigger advantage, though, for Notre Dame, just because you're going to, again, even though they both run their offenses differently, at their core, it's still option principles that you're talking about. And just from the aspect of the Notre Dame players seeing it once and then seeing it again, it's not, like this is, it's not like the typical Navy is, it's the one-off, like you get into Navy, hopefully you win, and then you move past them, and like there's some things that will carry over for Notre Dame's players as well, because of the fact that they have seen that. And I think they'll be able to, they should be able to get up to speed even quicker, when it comes to Army than just, it's like both of these, the one real common thing, two common things. One, they're both scoring points, and two, they both got really good quarterbacks kind of running things for them, so I think that there is some advantage for Army, but I actually think there's more advantage for Notre Dame in that instance.
Ooh. Get to see it twice, get to see the speed of it twice.
Yeah,
that's a
exactly.
good point.
Exactly.
No, that's a really good point. And and again, Notre Dame will be able to harken back to the way that they prepared and if they're successful, right? But the way they prepared, they can kind of go back to that with some tweaks and some twists and some things like that. And again, it won't be hard to get up for Navy because for Army, because they're also a ranked undefeated team right now. Whether they're that at the end, when Notre Dame sees them or not, doesn't really matter. They're still going to be a very good team.
You might have to help me with this one. I've read it a couple of times.
Okay.
So Joe says, worst scenario, Notre Dame winning out and all of their ranked wins fall out, or Notre Dame losing one more game.
I don't give a hoot look, I shouldn't say that. You want as many teams as you can that you get beat or that you beat to be ranked.
Oh, is he saying so you win these games and the ranked teams fall out of the top 25?
So like you have 11 wins, but none of them are ranked at the end of the season, or lose one more game. This is easy. It's losing one more game. That's where it is for me. There's a good chance, honestly, that there will be no ranked teams on Notre Dame's schedule once they get to the end of the season. That's absolutely possible, because right now, I believe that there's 3. Is that right? A&M, Army, and Navy. Those are the 3 that are ranked. I mean, if Notre Dame has 11 wins, then Army and Navy get another loss. So that'll probably drop them out of the top 25, most likely. And then like Texas A&M, look, they're going to battle in every game that they've got, but they've got a tough schedule down the stretch, with the SEC and all of that. So I'm hoping that A&M takes care of business, against LSU this weekend, for example. But if they lose, they're going to drop, and they're probably going to drop hard, and when Notre Dame beats Navy this weekend, they're going to drop hard. They're going to fall out of the top 25,
Well,
so,
especially, depending upon what the margin is, like that's going to go a long way as well toward whether or not.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Navy stays ranked. Do they just hang on?
Right.
Same kind of deal with Army, assuming Notre Dame
Yeah.
wins, how close, how competitive are
And I
these
think,
games?
yeah, that's a really good point. And I think Navy will have an opportunity to climb back in based on what they do the rest of the way, because they'll get a ranked Army team at some point. You know what I mean? Well, eventually. So yeah, look, if Notre Dame loses another game, they're with the way that things have gone so far, I would say Notre Dame will be out. At the very least, they'll be in the discussion, but they'll probably be out of the playoff. That's devastating. So you don't want another loss on this.
Yeah, I've seen people this last week, and and again, I think it's because everyone's afraid of Navy. And again, like respect your opponents and all that, whatever. Like, okay, Navy's good, but let's not write it off just yet. Yeah, I mean, you know how it is. Like Notre Dame fans just get so nervous about everything.
It's
it seems
hilarious.
Like. But
it's great.
Yeah. These questions have popped up in terms of, can Notre Dame get in as a 2-loss team? And again, when you look at the top 25 as it's comprised right now, I would put Notre Dame's, this is just my personal ranking system. I would put it at about 5%, Notre Dame's chances to get in if they lose one more game because of what's ahead of them right now.
Right, because they're going to be going up against, at that point, they would be going up against probably a decent chunk of 1-loss SEC teams, or 2-loss SEC teams for that matter. And strength of schedule is not going to hold up.
The only 2-loss teams getting in are probably going to be from the SEC.
Agreed.
Like a 2-loss Big Ten team would also have a chance. But what I'm saying is the greatest chance right now is going to be the SEC.
Completely agree. Because right now you've got too many Big Ten teams that only have 0 or 1 loss.
Right. And they're not all playing each other.
Correct. So that won't be an issue, obviously, moving forward. So yeah, a 2-loss Notre Dame team is going to have a really, really hard time getting in my opinion.
Yes. I agree with your opinion. Buy or sell. Buckner will score another touchdown at Notre Dame.
I mean, he's got this year and next year, I believe, if they want to keep him around, which I don't know why they wouldn't. I think they would use one of those extra scholarships on him because he is a valuable piece to this team, whether, on Saturdays or not, right? I mean, this is his junior year of eligibility for football, so he's got one more year of eligibility. We'll see if he sticks around. I'm going to go with no. I would love to say yes because I think it would be a really cool story. I mean, a 4-yard gain was a cool story, on Saturday, right? But I just don't see him getting that kind of an opportunity.
I'm going to say yeah.
There's my boy. I'm
going to say yeah because I can see him, like next year being a bigger part of special teams and like even if he's not running around out there as a receiver, and then on senior day, I could see, them, like if they've got a pretty comfortable lead, like trying to work something to get him the ball, give him an opportunity to get the ball in his hands, that kind of stuff. And just the way Marty Biaggi works these special teams and is always looking for those angles with the, the fakes and whatever else. I think, again, I don't think it's going to happen this year, but I could see next year him having a very good shot, like one more year and kind of finding out, other places he can help the team and all that.
I am curious to see if he comes back next year because he's already, obviously he's already got his degree. I mean, he'd be a 6th year, I believe, if I'm doing the math correctly. It would be interesting to see if he comes back. I'll just say that. But again, there's no reason Notre Dame wouldn't keep him on the team. He's a great asset to the team. He's, as Marcus Freeman said, he's the quarterback this week on the scout team. I mean, he's doing things that will help this football team. And so they would welcome him back. I'm just wondering if that's in his plans.
TBD, right?
TBD, baby.
So Joe, this is going to work your brain. Joe wants to know if on a parallel Earth, a theme song would play every time you'd enter a room. What would your respective theme songs be?
Does it have to be like a TV show theme song or like an actual song?
Just any song, I think. Any song.
Problem is, I don't know the names of any of the songs like that I really enjoy listening to. Do you have one?
I'm going back and forth on a couple in my head right now. I'm trying to decide which one makes more sense. Is it like, here I come walking through the door? I'll tell you what, it's just going to be, I'm just going to go with it. It's the first album, or it's the first song on one of my top 5 all-time favorite albums, Aerosmith's Pump. It's the song that leads off the album, Young Lust. And it's like, bum, 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 bum. And then, so like that's playing. I walk through the door, and then you got, Steven Tyler, Young Lust, so it's like, I'm not even going to attempt to do Steven Tyler. But that's, even though I'm not young anymore, I would go with the other one would have been also on Pump. Monkey on My Back is another one that I think would thump pretty good for an entrance song. So those would be my 2.
Man, the problem is I'd have to really think about this one. What
USMA 87 says baby got back.
Oh my. Wow.
Little in the middle, but he got much back.
I'm trying to remember what the name
he
of
really
the song
doesn't.
is.
It's kind of all right. You want to come back to it? I know that music,
Well, it's not. Yeah, I mean, look, yeah, music is not necessarily my thing, as they say. I just can't remember the name of the. We can come back to it because I got to figure out what the name of this song is. That's where I'm at.
Okay.
So I got one in my head, but I have no idea what the name of it is. So.
All right. You might have to Google the lyrics.
I'm working on it.
Joe also wants to know worst movie of the 21st century: Top Gun Maverick or Geely. I mean, come on.
Was Geely in the 21st century?
I believe it was. It was like, did it get 99 or was it like, it was right around 2000? That's a good question.
2003.
There you go.
Okay. So you win on that one. And if those are the 2 options, it's not Top Gun Maverick. Okay.
That's exactly.
Can we all be on the same page there? Apparently not, but come on, man.
It's those Wichita guys, man. Joe's a Wichita guy. Man. Let me see. Jeremiah. Why is Notre Dame back to 11-1 this week after NIU loss? Everyone thought they were 9-3. The preseason IB record was set at 11-1. I don't know where the one loss is coming from, but they'll have one loss. I'm not really sure, like, what's the actual question there. So, I mean, are you saying why do we think they're going to finish 11-1 when they already have the one loss? Is that kind of,
or why is Notre Dame back to 11-1 this week? I'm not sure. I guess I don't know how to answer the question. We all said 11-1 at the beginning of the year. A lot of us did, and we didn't know where that one loss was going to be. No one would have picked Northern Illinois, but I still think that that's where things are going to end up. So yeah, I mean, never would have picked this one. But I still feel like 11-1 is going to be the answer.
Yeah, I don't know what to add to that.
I figured out my song, by the way.
Okay. So Jeremiah says, yes, Northern Illinois was one loss, so what has changed now? So, like, do you want them to lose 2 more times? Like, I don't know who everyone was that said they were going to go 9-3. I never said they were going to be 9-3. So I don't feel like I have to justify
to Northern Illinois.
I don't feel like I have to justify that side of the argument because I never felt like that. So,
right. Archer's trying to help us out. He says, I think the question is, why are the expectations so volatile throughout the season? Preseason was 11-1, and then a big overreaction to the NIU loss, which has now swung back to being 11-1. So that's just being a fan and being an overreactive fan. I mean, the
overreaction really makes sense because we talk about it all the time. Like, this pendulum swings week to week. Even after a resounding win last week, I heard, like in the post-game show that the quarterback sucks again. He didn't throw any touchdown passes. He could have done all this stuff. He threw this horrible interception, even though he's still, led all these touchdowns.
Even though he went 12 for 12 at one point and 15 of 16. No big deal.
Right.
Terrible.
But that's the way it goes. The pendulum swings. Everybody overreacts, and you overreact to this micro type stuff most of the time. That doesn't mean and that's, as I said at the time after the Northern Illinois loss, all bets were off for the rest of the season because you have that Northern Illinois loss. Now there's still a chance that that they lose one of these remaining 5 games. There's still a chance that they could lose.
Oh, for
2
sure.
of them. I mean, look, Army and Navy are both ranked, and there are a lot of people, again, thinking that they're these insurmountable teams that Notre Dame can't get past. But I mean, that's essentially.
Well, I mean, look,
essentially it.
I think the question is also asking us to explain fans' overreaction too. And I hesitate to get inside the head of most fans who overreact to Notre Dame games. I mean, it's mind-boggling at times. I said 11-1 going into the season. I still feel like Notre Dame is going to be 11-1. It's just a razor-thin margin right now, and it has been since the NIU game. So, yeah, it was an overreaction, but I never changed my stance on who Notre Dame was. I said it was a week-to-week situation, but still felt like on paper, every game, Notre Dame should be favored. If you think Notre Dame is favored in every game, then you think they're going to win those games. Like, that's common sense, I guess. And so, yeah, I think Notre Dame's going to be 11-1.
Yeah.
Like, and Anthony, I just want to address this for fun. Whoops, wrong one. He says, the only negative I see with Riley running for so many touchdowns is the receiver recruits are looking for passing touchdowns. My response to that would be take the recruits to practice and let them watch either Minchie or Carr throw the football around. That would be my response to that. And then,
Carr's not throwing the ball right.
Well, you know what I mean. Like, that would be my.
But response, that's still that's obviously where the conversations are.
And I would also
look. This is going to look different next year.
And I would pop in LSU film and be like, that is the coordinator that is here now when he has that type of a quarterback. You know what I mean? So, like,
and again, I feel like this also kind of bleeds into one of the rapid fire questions that we're going to have, depending on what direction you decide to go with it. But it's kind of.
But yeah, I mean, look, I get why people are worried about wide receiver recruiting and all that, but it's not just what happens in games. Right. That's not the only thing that goes into recruiting. It's so much more than that. Like, we go to these game day visits, even with my kid, and we're watching the game, and it's like, he was talking philosophy with the kicking coach, and he's got this philosophy, and Dylan started asking some very pointed questions about the philosophy. And what it came down to was the kicking philosophy for this particular school and this particular coordinator are all based around the talent of the guys that they have. He's like, well, ideally, I'd like to do this, 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 and this, but the guys I have on my roster can't do it.
We're playing to the strengths of what we've got.
Right. So we do this. That's why those conversations take place, right? And I realize we're not talking about kickers, but the philosophy is the same idea, right? If I'm talking to an offensive coordinator or a wide receivers coach, and I'm a wide receiver, I'd be like, well, why do you guys do this, this, and this? And he'd be like, well, because we have to, because this is what we have. This is what we would like to do, and you're a perfect fit for that. Like, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
those conversations take place. And if you're trying to go to a place like Notre Dame, you can wrap your mind around those conversations. Like, you're intelligent enough to wrap your mind around those conversations. And it's not just what you see on the field on Saturdays. Rant over.
If the Florida State head coaching position opens up this season, will Deion Sanders take it?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Right?
I mean, that's the job that he wants. He wanted it like 5-6 years ago. He didn't get it.
That's the easiest question I think we've been asked so far tonight. He will leave the mountainous Colorado Buffaloes in a heartbeat and be the Florida State head coach. No question in my mind. And he's winning enough games this year to make that a reality. Like, if it was coming off the year before, now granted it was the first year and all that, they were terrible. They're winning enough that I could see that being the case.
Yeah, absolutely. They've made improvement. And even in his first year, now the bar was very low and they didn't finish well last year, but they still made improvement from his predecessor in year one.
That's true.
And so now they're probably, they're most likely going to have a winning record to finish this off. That's progress in year two. And what you hope, obviously, is the program becomes more stabilized. Now, when they lose Travis Hunter and Shadur Sanders, what's that program going to look like? Because those are obviously two, massive talents who are probably both going to end up going in the first round someplace. What's that look like for Deion without those guys? Well, if the Florida State job comes open and he takes it, he won't have to worry about that. But I absolutely think that he would take it if offered. That's where he wants to be.
Absolutely. All the love that he's been showing Colorado would be out the door real fast.
So Salty, I feel like, he's taking a little shot at me with this next one.
How dare.
Does Kansas have a chance to win at Kansas State?
Do they have a chance? Sure, they have a chance, but I'll let you answer the question.
I mean, they were a better team last year, and Kansas State still whipped them. I don't know if Kansas State is as good as they were last year, but they're still, like, for the Big 12 conference, they're one of the three best teams in the Big 12, maybe even one of the, best two, a chance to be the best team in the Big 12. Coming into this season, I thought that Kansas was, they were my dark horse pick in the Big 12. But unfortunately, their offensive line has just not been very good. And they've just been, they lost their offensive coordinator to Penn State, Kotelnicki. Like that, it's made a big difference. So I unfortunately do not give my Jayhawks much of a chance against the Wildcats this weekend.
Look, Kansas State's a good football team. I mean, plain and simple, right? They're really good. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. But everybody has a chance. Everybody has a chance.
That's why you show up, right?
That's right. That's why the games aren't played on paper. And whatever cliche else you want to go with.
I don't know. I feel like, maybe they should just play this Notre Dame Navy game.
I feel like Notre Dame has a chance on Saturday. I feel like they have a chance.
Carlos, is there a team in the top 10 that makes you nervous to play? Other than Georgia, none of them seem just head and shoulders above Notre Dame. Even they have their faults.
I was going to say, why would you say other than Georgia? They have a loss. They're obviously not infallible by any stretch of the imagination. Look, I think, again, I kind of said this at the top of the show. Notre Dame's defense will keep them in every single game.
Right.
Whoever they play, whoever they draw in the playoff, whatever that looks like. I'm not saying they're going to win it, but I think the defense keeps them in it. And as I'm looking at the top 10, Oregon, Georgia, Penn State, Ohio State, Texas, Miami, Tennessee, LSU, Clemson, Iowa State, I don't fear anybody. Look, Oregon, they're the number one team in the country. They're undefeated. Great. They've been taken to the wire a few different times, right? They almost lost a few different times. They didn't, hat tip to them, but they're not infallible by any stretch of the imagination. If anybody believes Penn State's going to be undefeated by the end of the season, then I want whatever you're smoking.
Here we go. Vince's first shot to take a shot at James Franklin.
Yep. I'll take it. So they could very well lose at Wisconsin this week, but probably won't. To be honest with you, the team that scares me the most is Ohio State. I just think they've got something over Notre Dame right now, but Notre Dame is not afraid of Ohio State because they know they can beat them. You know what I mean? But I feel like they've got the most talent. But again, they already have a loss too. So no, I'm not afraid of anybody, to be honest with you. I think they can play with anyone.
Yeah, I think Georgia would be the one that would actually, even though, like you said, Georgia has lost, obviously, but it's still only one loss, and it's to Alabama. And now, Alabama's got the 2 losses, go figure. But just like the way Georgia is built in the trenches scares me a little bit, just matching up against, Notre Dame on both sides of the ball. But most of the other teams, I just feel like they would be really competitive games. So no, would they scare me? No, I think that they would all of those matchups potentially would be really competitive.
Agreed.
So none of them other, again, Georgia a little bit more just because of the speed size combination and all that, but none of the others would.
And I also, this isn't a year where there's one or two teams that are just head and shoulders above everybody else. You know what I mean? And I think that's definitely part of it as well. There's no, 2019 LSU. There's no team that you're like, we can beat anybody in the top 5 except that team. Like, I just don't think that team exists this year, which, going back to a previous question, it's why it's going to be a great 12-team playoff.
Yes. Joe wants to know if you could pick, who would you pick as your head coach in a big game? Brian Kelly or James Franklin? They're not playing against each other.
God, this is a terrible question.
I've got to go Franklin because I've seen that movie with Brian Kelly too many times.
Well, you had front row seats to that movie.
Exactly.
The movie's been playing in Happy Valley, but we just haven't been paying that close of attention to it.
That's true. That's very true.
But so they're both terrible options. They're both. Who are my coordinators? Does that help? I don't know. Do I have good coordinators? It just those are horrible options. Horrible options. I guess. Look, this is gonna be poison coming out of my mouth. Brian Kelly's at least won national championships at a lower level, so I'll take Brian Kelly.
So at least there's some evidence. I know that stung, didn't it? Singes the nostrils.
Oh, it's horrible.
Since the field goal kicker is the PAT kicker, who kicks a straight ball from the center of the hashes? Okay, I need to start this again. My emphasis is on the wrong syllables. Okay. Since the field goal kicker is the PA kicker, got it. I still can't talk. Take 3. Since the field goal kicker is the PAT kicker, who kicks a straight ball from the center of the hashes, should Notre Dame get the ball to the center on likely field goal third downs? You're saying should they center it up? Like, should they try to center the ball for field goals? Is that
every kicker wants the ball in the middle? Okay,
right. So unless there's one hash that you prefer,
right? And if you watch NFL games, they have a deeper PAT. It's a 33-yard field goal attempt. Okay, from the 25-yard line. I'm sorry, from the 15-yard line, but it's a 33-yard field goal. You'll see kickers based on this. They're kind of like golf, right? You either have a natural fade or a natural hook. You'll see them set up on the hash because the hashes are much more narrow in the NFL. You'll see them set up on one hash or the other because the further away that you kick the football, the more of an opportunity you have for the ball to hook or fade. And so, no. Okay, so the answer to the question is no.
Just center the damn ball is what you're saying.
You would love to have the ball centered, but if you're trying to score a touchdown, you're not going to waste your third down play centering the football.
Right.
The only time I would waste a third down centering the football is for a game-winning field goal.
Right. You're at the end of the game. You're killing clock.
Right.
You're like at the 20-yard line. You're going to kick it because there's like less than 30 seconds left. You're not going to take a shot at the end zone or any of that kind of stuff.
Right.
Run the ball one more time. Get it in the middle. Basically, you're going to ask the kicker, where do you want it?
Correct. Absolutely.
That's what you're going to do. And that's when you either run left, right, or just run it right up.
Because there's certain kickers that love the left hash, they hate the right
especially
hash.
When you get in closer at those angles and stuff like that.
Yes. And, in college, the hashes are more closer together than in high school. Yeah. And then in NFL, they're even closer together, right? Like in the NFL, the line of the 5 offensive linemen go over the hashes if it's in the middle. Like that's how narrow the hashes are in the NFL. In high school, they're ridiculously wide. They go beyond the field goal uprights. You know what I mean? And so when you're close up and you're kicking like a 25-yard field goal from the right hash, that's a serious angle, that you're trying to kick. So of course you would want it more in the middle than on the hash. So it's a great question, but not only if it's a game winner. Only if.
Thank you for the super chat, Tyler. Do you think Lincoln Riley misses Oklahoma, or do you think Oklahoma fans miss Lincoln Riley?
He had a good thing going there.
He did.
And he did not want to be a part of the SEC. He goes to USC, and now he's part of the Big Ten, which obviously is also not working out real well. And I think we all kind of predicted that would be the case. So I would say he probably misses Oklahoma right about now. I think he does. Although he probably enjoys his LA mansion.
Yeah, I think he likes the LA mansion. I'm sure he doesn't mind having, the ocean there.
Right,
but just in terms of what he had at Oklahoma and what he's got now at USC.
Yeah.
I think Oklahoma fans are still, like they feel about Lincoln Riley a lot like Notre Dame fans think about Brian Kelly, just in terms of the way he left. And
that's fair.
He
did kind of he did kind of pull one of those middle of the night hop on the plane deals. Like that's pretty low rent the way he left. So I agree with you on that one.
From A, who would Notre Dame be favored over in the top 15?
In the top 15? Okay.
I would probably say nobody right now because it doesn't seem like Notre Dame.
I mean, look,
maybe the team's right behind them.
How about the team that they beat, Texas A&M?
That's a good one. Top 15. I forgot. I wasn't thinking
because they're 14. I think realistically they would be favored over IU. Okay. Now, IU fans probably don't want to hear that, but I still think that that's accurate.
I think neutral site, they're -3 against Indiana.
Okay, fair enough. I think they should be favored over Iowa State. I watched Iowa State play. They probably should have lost the last game. I think they should be favored over Iowa State.
I think neutral site, they're -7 against Iowa State.
Look at you throwing out numbers. Oh, love it.
Just trying to make things interesting here.
Let's go through it then. BYU.
Okay. BYU neutral site. I'd go back to -3 again.
Okay. Clemson.
Close game. Clemson's an interesting one because they've gained a lot of moment, since getting boat raced by Georgia. I think Notre Dame is +3.5 against Clemson.
Clemson's the favorite. Okay.
Yeah.
What about the Fighting Brian Kellys?
This is another interesting one, and it's why this weekend's matchup against Texas A&M is so intriguing because, 3 years in a row, BK has lost that season opener and then rattled off a bunch of wins after that. He hasn't
Texas
lost.
A&M. Yeah, that's a big one.
But USC stinks, so I think LSU is -2.5 against Notre Dame.
Okay, so not favored against LSU.
Well, because you're going to get, SEC bias.
100%.
All that.
Because we're talking about who's favored, not who's going to win. Those are two different questions.
Right.
So I think Tennessee is probably favored over Notre Dame. Wouldn't you agree? SEC bias again.
Yes, I would put that like maybe 4.5.
Yeah,
Tennessee.
The interesting one for me is Miami, to be honest with you, but
I know
people seem to love Miami,
and that. I think Jesse and I were talking about it yesterday. Like they should have obviously lost a couple of times, but they won, and
they
that's
did.
what continues to work in Miami's favor. I feel like their defense is not very good. Obviously, their offense carries most of the load, but look at Notre Dame's defense and match Miami up against that. I think it's a really even game. I'd put, I'd put Miami, 2.5 points. Minus 2.5 against Notre Dame. I think it would be because you'd have strength on strength.
Okay.
Basically.
So without going through the rest of these, because now you're Texas, Ohio State, Penn State, Georgia, Oregon.
Yeah.
Any of those teams that Notre Dame would be favored against right now?
I don't think so.
The only one that's even in consideration for me is Penn State.
I knew you'd say that.
Well, that's where I'm at.
But it's a totally fair take because of who they are.
Right. So let's give this a few weeks because some of those teams are going to come back to earth too. So I do feel that way.
Right.
I wish Florida State would just rise up at this point and beat Miami. I think that would be so embarrassing for Miami and the Miami fans. That would be fantastic. That would be so great.
I agree. All right. I've got a couple more here. I'm just going to save and include them with rapid fire. Are you ready for rapid fire, Vince?
Let's go, baby. Rapid fire it up.
So
you got some good ones today.
All right. I like it. I like that you like them. So Notre Dame wide receiver Jaden Thomas recently said this about what his time at Notre Dame has been like. Quote, I've had 3 receiver coaches, 2 head coaches, 3 OCs, 2 DCs, 2 special teams coaches. It is what it is. You come to a place like Notre Dame for Notre Dame, it's not just because of a coach, but a culture and family and the brand of football. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world, end quote. So what does that say to you? That says what to you, Vince?
It says to me that he's got his head screwed on right and that he understands the benefit of a Notre Dame degree. He understands the culture at Notre Dame, and he's the ultimate team player. And look, he's not getting the touches that I'm sure he could get elsewhere if he decided to hit the transfer portal and, all of those different things. But he's also come in pretty clutch at times as well. He's had some big catches. He hasn't had a lot, but he's had some big ones. He's had some moments, right? And so I think he just understands this is the spot. This is where I need to be. And I think that I think he gets it. I think he gets it, which I think is really, really important. And those are the kind of guys that you want at Notre Dame. Those are the kind of guys you want anywhere on a team, right? The guy that they just understand the culture, they get it. And it makes me happy to be a Notre Dame fan when I hear guys like that talk.
Well, and just the aspect of I think there's so many people who are conditioned to, well, the guy's not playing, so he's going to enter the transfer portal,
right.
is the first response. And obviously he's been part of the selling point for so many of these guys is that it's Notre Dame and they get what Notre Dame is about. But to me, what stood out is those first 2 sentences: 3 receivers coaches, 2 head coaches, 3 OCs, 2 DCs, 2 special teams coaches. It kind of hit me in the face. It's so much of, I think, what we take for granted is just the coaching and the continuity and the consistency, but there hasn't been any, especially if you're obviously a wide receiver, because not only has a veteran receiver like Jaden Thomas had 3 position coaches in his time here at Notre Dame, he's had 3 offensive coordinators and 2 head coaches as well. And he participates in special teams. So he's had a couple of special teams coaches as well. So that's a lot, So I think that again, I feel like there's a lot that kind of gets taken for granted. I'm not giving anybody free, free passes for, wins or losses or anything else like that. But it really does kind of, put it into perspective. You always hear, well, it puts it in perspective, but it does put it in perspective. Like there's been a lot of transition and a lot of turnover and just a lack of consistency from the top when you see it spelled out like that. And it's in some ways, it makes it even more impressive what they've been able to do on the field the last couple of years when you look at it like that.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed.
So Irish defensive coordinator Al Golden said this about having the right players on the field to defend Navy Saturday. Quote, it's really not about the guys that rushed the passer well or the guys that played well last week or the guys that played well versus Texas A&M. It's the guys that play this defense well and obviously that play against this offense and how they operate well. I think that's the most important thing, end quote. So you hear that, Vince? Do you think we see, either guys lining up in spots maybe we don't usually see them line up in and or, maybe some faces mixed in that we haven't seen as much of before on defense so far?
Oh, yes to all of those questions. I think that one of the things that has been a paramount to Al Golden's defense is when they play Navy or they play a triple option team, he's in the bag, man. Like he understands that you've got to get some athletes on the field that can go that first of all, understand the defense, understand what triple option is, and then can go out and make plays from an athletic standpoint. Right. And like, they had Jack Kaiser playing safety, I think one year, and they've had different guys playing different spots. I think you're going to see the athleticism of the 5 rotating linebackers. Like, I feel like there's going to be maybe an opportunity where you might see 4 or 5 of those guys on the field at the same time because they're all going to be crowded around the line of scrimmage, but they can also run with some of those wing backs and some of those wide receivers as well. And I think that's going to, not that they're going to necessarily take Xavier Watts off the field or, the best part is you've got
safety's
options.
Still important.
Yeah. You've got options, but you can put a Jalen Sneed or somebody like that in a position where you might not have him before. Like this might not be a big Jordan Clark game, right? At the nickel. They might have somebody else. Maybe that's Jaden Osbury.
We might not play nickel, but because tackling is going to be so important and he's covered and tackled well, maybe you just see more of him outside,
right?
For example.
And look, do I necessarily want Christian Gray competing against a team like Navy where he's got kind of an issue with his shoulder? Do I want him making a bunch of tackles? Maybe that's where I put Jordan Clark for a little while. You know what I mean? Exactly. So there's a lot of options that you have if you're Al Golden, and I think you're definitely going to see some guys playing in some different spots.
Yep. Stymie brings up, and I agree with everything that you're saying, Stymie brings up KVA, and Jesse was calling his shot toward the end of yesterday. He said maybe KVA makes sense as, like up on the edge of the defense, that kind of thing. Like maybe you see him up on the line of scrimmage. Yeah, no, I know.
It's just he's going to be.
That's Jesse's shot call. So I was just, throwing that out there. I don't know that happens, but I brought up Greer Martini yesterday. And it
perfect
took me
example.
Yeah, exactly. He was like the Navy triple option middle linebacker, and would sort of come out of mothballs and get his tackles against Navy. And then you'd barely see him, unless it was on special teams the rest of the year.
Look, I think if Drake Bowen hadn't had the games he's had the last 2 or 3 weeks, I would be more on board with KVA being the leading tackler. But right now, Drake Bowen's playing at a very high level. I wouldn't take him out of the middle. Now, maybe having both of those guys in there, maybe having all 3 of those guys in the middle, right? If you had Kaiser and Bowen and KVA all in the middle, with different responsibilities and things like that, you could be pretty competitive with that group. So, it just depends on how they want to run it and how they want to do it. But you've got a lot of athleticism and a lot of speed at that second level that you can take care of business with.
And they're all smart enough that, like the assignments should be pretty natural to them.
Agreed.
Again, like Jalen Sneed, remember, he started against Navy. Last year.
And he started against Navy as a freshman too.
Yeah.
He didn't play a bunch, but he started. So there's that.
That's absolutely right. Okay, Vince. So there's a lot of talk about, college football playoff chances, predictions going on right now. We teased this a little bit in the mailbag earlier. Scale of 1 to 10. What is your legitimate concern that Notre Dame could miss the playoffs with one loss at the end of the regular season?
Zero. I have no concern whatsoever that Notre Dame will miss the playoff at 11-1. None. No concern.
Really?
Yeah, really.
Well, mine's polar opposite because mine is 8 because of all these teams that we've talked about. Well, I think you're wrong. My concern is an 8 because, again, I see a lot of people talking about, can they get in with 2 losses? That's not going to happen. But there are scenarios going on in the Big Ten, the Big 12, the ACC right now. Like if the dominoes continue to fall the way they're going, for starters, there's a chance that 3 Big Ten teams, Oregon, Penn State, and Indiana, could all be undefeated going into at the end of the regular season. So none of them are getting left out. One of them is going to have to get left out of the Big Ten championship game. There's another scenario where 5 teams from the Big Ten could end up with just 1 loss. And what's that do? I mean, that blows everything up. And then you look at the Big 12 where you've got 3 teams and the scenarios in the Big 12, it's basically BYU, Iowa State, and Kansas State. You could have 2 unbeatens and a 1-loss team. You could have 3 1-loss teams, or you could have 2 unbeaten and 1 loss. It's the scenarios there are just nuts. And then you've obviously got the group of 5 team, the best group of 5 team that's guaranteed a spot. And then in the ACC, you could have 3 teams unbeaten in conference play at the end of the season. One of them might be unbeaten overall. The other 2 might just have 1 loss. And the thing about all of these teams, Vince, is even if, they knock each other off, all of their losses are going to be better losses than what Notre Dame has. That's going to that NIU loss could really sting them when it comes to selection at the end of the year. So that's why my concern is very high.
I'm not concerned in any way, shape, or form because I don't think any of those scenarios are actually going to come into play. I think the ACC and the Big 12.
How are they not going to come into play?
I think the ACC and the Big 12
play each other.
The ACC and the Big 12 have more of a chance of being a 1-bid league than the crazy scenarios that you just came up with. I think that's more realistic than anything else.
Well, we'll pull this at the end of the season because the fact that you think
there's zero chance,
crazy scenarios,
there's 0 chance that IU is undefeated at the end of the season. 0.
Yeah, but they might have 1 loss, and that's to Ohio State. And you think they're going to get?
You said that they would have 0 losses going into the Big Ten championship. That's
I said there is a chance.
Yeah,
but there is also a chance that they are one of 5 teams that would have just 1 loss, and 5 1-loss Big Ten teams are not getting left out of the playoff. They're all going to get in before Notre Dame because the Big Ten and the SEC, the Big Ten and the SEC, Vince, are basically threatening the future of the college football playoff if they don't get the bids that they want this year.
That's
you can look at it in your myopic Notre Dame way if you want, but I don't think you're right.
That's fine, but I also don't think that that's going to happen. Teams are going to every single week we've seen this year. There have been upsets and there have been teams that have won that aren't supposed to win or whatever. It's just not going to happen. It could. Sure, it could. If there's 5 1-loss teams in the Big Ten after the conference playoff or after the conference championship, if there are 5 1-loss teams, sure, Notre Dame doesn't get in. It's not going to happen.
Okay.
So
we'll see. But it doesn't even have to be 5, though, because if the Big Ten and the SEC each get 4 bids, which is very realistic. Okay, so that's 8. You throw in the group of 5. That's 9. So if the Big Ten and the Big 12 rather and the ACC combine for 3 bids, that's 12 right there.
I told you, I think those are going to be 1-bid leagues.
Oh, I know you think they're going to, but one of those 2 conferences is going to get 2 in. I would bet $100 on that right now.
Well, I would not bet $100 because I don't have $100.
I would bet you $2.
Maybe. Maybe.
The problem is, again, you look at the Big 12 as the example, Iowa State, BYU are both unbeaten right now. I don't think either of them is a great team, but even if they lose, they would, either lose to each other or Kansas State would be involved in there as well. And those are all going to be more quality losses than what Notre Dame can vouch for. That's why it's a concern to me, because no matter, even if, even if these teams all lose a game, the rest of the way, it's more than likely than not going to be to a ranked team and not a middling MAC team.
So do you think that do you think the committee is going to weigh who you lost to more or who you beat more?
Well, both. Like, which one is going to be like, I think it will be held more against Notre Dame that they have a loss to a MAC team than any of these teams who would potentially lose a conference game to another Power 4
because
team.
Notre Dame at the end of the season, when they played the games, Notre Dame will have beaten a heck of a lot of ranked teams at the end of the year if they go 11-1, right?
But they'll also be disregarded as, group of 5 teams.
Because if Texas A&M keeps winning the way they're winning, then Notre Dame's win at Texas A&M is going to be massive, right?
Say that again.
If Texas A&M and Notre Dame both win out, then Notre Dame's win over Texas A&M is going to be huge.
Oh, sure. But
that, to me, that outweighs a loss to NIU. Because you're talking about a college football playoff team that you beat.
But let's say Penn State loses to Ohio State and Indiana loses to Ohio State. And those end up being their only losses. Those are going to be a lot easier to forgive than losing to Northern Illinois.
Agreed that a loss to Ohio State is better than a loss to Northern Illinois. Right. I do not disagree with that in any way. It's just, is Penn State going to win out after they play Ohio State? I think that's why there's the potential for them to be one of 5 teams with one loss. Sure, because they play Ohio State. You're right. There's potential that could happen. I just think that is so many things have to go correct for that to even come close to occurring.
I don't think it's nearly as crazy as you think. When you look at the schedules of who they're playing, there is a very good likelihood that at a minimum you're going to see 4 one-loss teams in the Big Ten, if not the 5.
Okay.
Now, the wild card in all this is Indiana, because, of course, they lost their quarterback, and he had thumb surgery. Fill in the blank. It would be blank if Indiana makes the playoff with a first-year head coach.
It would be unbelievable if they make the playoff. It would be unbelievable. It would be a great story. It would be a great story. I think Curt Cignetti has one of the best sound bites ever when he's like, I win, Google me. Like that. He is great. He's an easy guy to root for. I think that it's a great story. It would be amazing if he took over IU and took them to the playoff in the first year. It'd be amazing.
It would be amazing. It kind of changes the curve for any first-year head coach when you can not only go to a program that doesn't traditionally even make bowl games, let alone have winning seasons, and get them to the college football playoff in the first year. And we've kind of ripped Mike Norvell and Lincoln Riley both, for leaning on the transfer portal so much. And that's exactly what Cignetti did down there. So great for them, but for the rest of the world, I think that it kind of skews things pretty quickly.
Oh, because it definitely raises the bar. How does IU win all these games? You know what I mean? How come you can't win? That's a tough, that'd be a tough one to answer, I suppose, if you're a first-year head coach anywhere else.
Yeah, I'm looking. Now, USMA is saying what would be IU's win. I'm not sure, under which scenario you're talking about. Obviously, if IU runs the table, they're going to have a win over Ohio State. They would also have a win over Michigan. Now, not that great Michigan team, but they would also have a win over
2 weeks ago, they were top 5. So how the mighty have fallen as far as Michigan is concerned. You know what I mean? They were everybody's darling there for a little while. And now all of a sudden, they're terrible.
Right.
Which is funny to me, but whatever.
Yeah. If IU is able to run the table, that would include a win over Ohio State. So if that's what you're asking. but they would also
absolutely be their best win. Yes.
And, like even if Michigan ends up being outside the top 25, which it's looking more and more likely that's what they're going to end up, it's still like IU doesn't beat Michigan. They've had a lot of close calls before, now they, like right now, their best win, as Father David points out, is Nebraska. I mean, they just beat down Nebraska.
Yes, they did. Week. Yes, they did. I think it finally got people's attention with that win. Like, you know what I mean? I feel like that win finally got people's attention when it comes to IU, because they should not have won by the margin that they did.
Right. Like USMA 87 is saying that's why he thinks a one-loss IU team has a tough road. I mean, the quarterback, and again, he just had thumb surgery, is what, was reported today. What the extent of that is, I don't know. We'll find out how the backup plays. The backup did start his career at Tennessee. I think this is his second year at Indiana now. But again, like this is why it would be dicey if Notre Dame going into Selection Sunday is going up against all these other one-loss teams, because then you're parsing all these resumes. Who's your best win against? Who's your worst loss against? All those different kind of things. And yeah, so if Indiana were to close the regular season with a loss to Purdue, and that ends up being their only loss, obviously that's a big difference than losing to Ohio State. But like in the Big Ten, it's all these ranked teams that are the potential stumbling block. Like in Indiana, like they haven't, like I'm looking back, like they haven't even been challenged really this year.
No, that's true.
And that's also what's crazy about them. It's like, not only are they undefeated, it's not like they're skating by these teams.
They haven't.
Every win is more impressive than the last one.
Yeah, they haven't had a close game yet. I mean, 31-7, 77-3, 42-13, 52-14, 42-28, 41-24, 56-7. Like, they haven't had a close game. Right. Washington's going to be a handful for them. You know what I mean? And I think, potentially Michigan State could be a handful. Look, they don't have the easiest road, I would say, to finish it off. Now, if they somehow get through Ohio State, they're going to wallop Purdue. But no, they might wallop Purdue anyway. But their next 4 games are going to be tough. There's no doubt about it. Washington, Michigan State, Michigan, and Ohio State. That's a tough 4-game stretch, even though Washington's 4-3. That's still a tough stretch.
Right. So USMA is saying without it, they have no signature win, and unranked Nebraska. Notre Dame beat A&M at Kyle Field. But again, that's going to be, I mean, we're assuming Notre Dame goes in there with 1 loss. But again, that's going to be part of the question. How much and part of it's also going to be, how does Texas A&M finish? That's completely out of Notre Dame's hands right now.
Absolutely.
Like, you've got to assume that A&M, like if A&M's only loss ends up being to Notre Dame, that is obviously a huge feather in Notre Dame's cap, and that could sway things quite a bit.
There's also a chance that if that happens, that A&M is ranked higher than Notre Dame too.
It's exactly right.
I think that's actually a very solid possibility. That
not even including them like in that, in the conversation right now. But like, who does A&M? They obviously have LSU this weekend, and then they've got South Carolina, New Mexico State, Auburn, and Texas. And I think we all saw last week that maybe that Texas A&M game is going to be a lot more competitive than people would have thought a few weeks ago.
For sure.
So it's not going to be easy for Texas A&M by any stretch, but if they are able to run that table, then, again, like how much does that good win for Notre Dame offset?
Sure.
Probably what's going to be the worst resume loss for anyone who's in consideration.
And I think the question of what do they weigh more heavily, wins or losses, I think that absolutely comes into play. And as Anthony says here, he says the initial seating from the committee will tell us a lot about Notre Dame's future for 2024. I completely agree with that. You're going to get a peek into what they think of Notre Dame in that first ranking. And I think you'll have a really good idea of where Notre Dame is going to fall at the end with where they're ranked in the beginning. I think that will be very telling. I think that's a really good point. So we'll see how it goes.
Tommy says, is it better or worse for Notre Dame that the eventual conference champs start separating themselves out? I think it's better because that means that other teams, again, because it's not like Notre Dame is going to end up being in this conversation for being like one of the top 4 or 5 teams at this point. They're going to be competing against these other teams in that 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 range. So you want as many 2-loss teams from these conferences.
You want as many 2-loss teams as possible. That's absolutely what you want. That way you can say, well, we've only got one. That's absolutely what you want. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it.
I don't completely disagree with what Father David is saying. He's saying good wins always trump a bad loss. Look at the year Ohio State got smacked by Virginia Tech. But, again, I guess what helps Notre Dame is the fact that Navy and Army are both ranked,
Oh, definitely.
So that helps. That'll help build the resume. Otherwise, as we've said all along, there's just not enough meat on the bone otherwise in terms of quality wins for them to have.
Here's the problem for Notre Dame. Okay. They beat it this is all at the time, right? They at the time ranked Texas A&M. They're still ranked. At the time ranked Louisville, right? And then they'll beat an at the time ranked Navy, at the time ranked Army, right? So, and then USC hasn't been good enough and Florida State hasn't been good enough. So it's like they beat these teams and they haven't held up their end of the bargain. You know what I mean? Like Louisville is not holding up their end of the bargain right now, in my opinion.
Right.
They're 4-3 overall. We all thought that they would be better than that.
Yep.
Their last 4 games, they're 1-4 or 1-3, and that obviously includes the Notre Dame game. But then they lost SMU and they lost to Florida and they beat Virginia by 4. So they're not holding up their end of the bargain. That's part of the problem here is that the teams Notre Dame is beating aren't holding up their end of the bargain. So that stinks if you're a Notre Dame fan.
Right. How good a chance does A&M have to win the SEC? Well, if they beat LSU and they beat Texas, they've got
they got a great shot
to be playing in the SEC championship game.
Right. Yeah, 100%. I think they've got a good shot as anybody right now. They're playing pretty good football. This week will be key. This week will be absolutely key because is the news that Quinn Ewers is sitting out the rest of the season? Is that accurate or was that just a thing?
I think that is just a thing.
That was just a thing. Okay.
Yeah, I think that.
All right.
I think it came from some overly active fan imagination.
Again, Texas fans.
Leaping to the conclusion that because Manning got to play, that Quinn Ewers was going to sit and
gotcha. Yeah, which was a knee-jerk reaction by Steve Sarkisian, by the way, because when Manning went in there, he looked terrible overall. So he had that one scramble, I think, which was okay, but he looked overmatched in that game. But anyway, long story short, if they can beat LSU this week, I give them a great shot of going into that Texas game with a chance to be in the SEC championship.
Yeah. 24/7, by the way, put it up. I think it was on their Instagram account or something. Okay. And then like Tommy says, they took it down and said they were hacked. So
okay. That's always the excuse.
Yeah.
I was hacked.
Yeah.
Got it.
And Josh, obviously everything that we're talking about as far as Notre Dame concerns is that they beat Navy because we're talking about them as a one-loss team at the end of the year.
It's pending that they beat everybody on the remaining.
Again, I'm on record. If they lose another game, I don't think they've got any shot.
We're done. We just pack it up. We're done. Show's over. No.
Yeah.
Yes, if they lose another game, we are not even having this discussion. Discussion's over. Yes, agreed with that.
So, Vince, Jason Kelly says goalposts should be narrowed because kickers are too good in influencing games these days. Do you buy or sell it?
It's a huge sell. I don't understand why somebody being good at something means that you got to change the rules. So, I don't know. The quarterbacks are too good right now. I guess we got to give them a volleyball to throw instead of a football. That makes I don't know. That doesn't make sense to me. He was a center, right? Well, sorry, Jason, you are too good at your position. You have to snap the ball with your face, now.
Right.
You're not allowed to use your hands. Like that. No.
I noticed that brotherly shove doesn't work as well in Philly without Kelsey in the middle of that offensive line, by the way. I don't know if you've seen any Eagles games since then, but yeah, like, so
it's just like, come on, Jason, just stick to something different. Don't.
I don't know if you remember this idea I floated out a while back. Like, if the kickers are really this good, then my idea is do one of two things. You either put a third upright that is right down the middle of the goalpost, and if the kicker can hit that middle upright on the fly, you get an extra, like you get 4 points instead of 3 points for
okay.
If it's at least like beyond 40 yards, maybe, like something like that.
It's not easy to hit a goalpost. All right.
That's what I'm saying.
That's very difficult to do.
It's a difficult shot, but you put it right down the middle, and maybe you put it back, like on the back beam or whatever. So it's not like up at the front, but you've got to get it through there, and you've got to hit it on the fly. Either that or like put one of those like net targets, like in a kind of in the middle, and like you kick it into that target, then you get an extra, like something like that.
So
that
it
actually
rewards some accuracy.
True accuracy.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like that. I actually don't mind that. It would look weird to see a pole down the middle, but I like where your head's at. I do. I like where your head's at.
Like, if they're really that good, then challenge them a little bit.
Because look, he's not wrong in the fact that these kickers have crazy strong legs, like what they call in the industry the big ball, right? I mean, some of these kids can just boot the snot out of the football, right? And it's showing itself in college and in the pros with how far away these guys are able to kick the football. Like, there's no doubt about that. But across the board, in every sport, at every position, players are better than they were 10 years ago. Like that. Yeah. That's just reality, man. You don't have to change the rules because of that. Like, I don't like the narrow. Like, have you ever looked at NFL goalposts? Those things are pretty narrow to begin with. I mean, those things are crazy narrow.
Right.
So, I don't buy narrowing the goalposts unless you're going to start making new rules for all the positions.
Good point. Joe asks, better episodic show genius, Vince Gilligan, of course, the creator of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, or Larry David, who, of course, one of the co-creators of Seinfeld and Curb Your Enthusiasm.
It's Larry David, and it's not close for me.
I love all four shows, but to me, it's Larry David as well. Just like, George was, Costanza was obviously his avatar in Seinfeld, and he did it so well. But, like, part of also what made Larry so great was not just the fact that, like, he can make you feel so uncomfortable watching either him or George in these different situations, but the multiple storylines that they've got going on within each episode. And then he magically is able to connect the three storylines by the end of the episode. It's just, he's brilliant, man. He's brilliant. So I got to go with Larry David as well.
It's Larry David. And the fact that he was, apparently Vince was an X-Files writer, that does not raise his stock for me. So
I forgot that he was an X-Files writer, but now that you say that, I do remember that. I think that's kind of where, like, kind of Vince Gilligan's first big break. But all right, so Salty wants us to pick a couple. LSU, Texas A&M.
Well,
A&M's the home team.
A&M. I'm going to go A&M. Of course, I'm going to go A&M for so many different reasons.
Yep. A&M. I have not been that impressed with what I've seen of Nussmeier this year.
Yeah, agreed. And I think, look, Elko's defense has gotten better and better every week, and I think he's going to give Nussmeier some fits. And look, he was on the same staff as Brian Kelly for a while too. So I think that could work in Elko's advantage.
True. Very true. Michigan or Michigan State?
I mean, I'll be rooting for Michigan State. I still think Michigan State is probably a year away at this point. So I will take Michigan on this, even though I will be rooting for Michigan State.
Yeah, they it's crazy. They have identical records. They're both 4-3 overall,
Crazy.
both 2-2 in the conference. And it felt like when Michigan beat USC, maybe there was kind of like a bounce back after, losing to Texas, a corner had been turned, all that. But like, it just turns out USC is not that good. So you really,
right.
You can't base anything on that. But I'm going to go with Michigan as well, even though their quarterback situation is just horrible right now.
Yeah, I just think the trajectory for Michigan, like if we're talking long term, I think the trajectory for Michigan State is actually better than Michigan. I like their coaching staff better. I like what they're doing in the recruiting trail and the transfer portal and all that. I like Michigan State better in the long run. But in this particular game, I'll take Michigan with the hopes that I'm wrong.
I agree. Well, I think that's going to do it for tonight, Vince.
Ooh, is that it? Okay.
It is. You smell the dinner cooking upstairs?
Something. My wife's trying a new dish. I'm excited. I don't know if you know. I was told new, so
all right.
I'm ready. I'm excited.
All right, we will talk to you tomorrow. We've got some Marcus Freeman stuff from his noon Zoom. We'll see what kind of stuff pops up, and of course, it's We In, We Out day. I've got to go post the thread on the Champions Lounge so you can submit your We In, We Out questions, and don't forget to hit that like button before you leave the show tonight as well. Always appreciated. All right, great questions from the crowd tonight. Have a good one. We'll talk to you tomorrow on Ivy Nation Sports Talk.